everybody. Let me know when you arrive in here. Live video is starting. Hello everybody. Let me know if you're watching. It'd be great to see you here. So I can have a conversation with a few of you, maybe have a chat. We're talking menopause and stress today, and the relationship between the two. So it'd be good to have a dialogue and have some people here watching and listening to what I'm saying. Please let me know if you're here. I know that last time people were here and I couldn't see you, so again I'm not sure whether that is going to be the case, but we'll hopefully have some people here watching. Let me just invite a few people in to see if they will perhaps come and join us. Let's try that one and that one, and Lawrence. Lauren said she was coming. I'm not sure who else said they were coming, but let's do that for now, and let's just see who else might have said they were coming. Who else said they were coming? Kerry, so let's invite Kerry as well. So if you're here, that would be great. Got at least one viewer. That's brilliant. Hello, welcome to the group. Nice to see you. Today, as I say, talking stress, talking about your menopause and stress. So my first question really to you is, and if you're listening on catch up, you may want to put this answer in there as well, is what is your relationship with stress? Because my relationship with stress has changed quite considerably since I went through perimenopause and menopause. So for me, I used to create stress as a motivator. I used to love it. I thought there was something about pressure, challenge and change that I thrived on. It brought me interest, excitement. It even brought jeopardy. But it was my motivator. You know, a deadline that was too far away didn't motivate, but a deadline right next door to me was really my creative inspiration. I could get stuff done. And then it wasn't. And I didn't quite see it coming. And I didn't quite understand what had happened. Stress took hold of me. Stress was no longer my friend. Small stress, I had a high stress response. Little things would really bother me. My executive skills, so my memory, my thinking, my organisation, my ability to meet deadlines, all of those things just went boom and plummeted. They really disappeared. And I was having an emotional response to everything. It might be tears, it might be frustration, it might be anger, but there was emotional stuff there. It was going on. There was increased catastrophizing, blaming, mood swings, and I was in burnout. So what happened? Because stress had been my friend, and I was confused. I didn't know what was going on. I really didn't know what was going on. So I thought about, why do we succumb to stress more and more easily in perimenopause and postmenopause than we do the rest of the time? And that's an interesting one, because sex hormones during our fertile years are our superpowers in this respect, because they buffer the effect. Estrogen and progesterone protect us from the effects of stress. They kind of limit the impact that cortisol has on our brain function and on our heart function, so that we get our cardiovascular system is supported through estrogen, so is the brain. Progesterone buffers the anxiety impacts, etc., that may be triggered by stress. Now we know this, particularly with progesterone, because we can see that progesterone is actually released in all mammals when they're under stress, and that's been replicated in humans, both male and female. So progesterone is a protective hormone for stress, and we know estrogen is a protective hormone for our cardiovascular system and our brains. So our sex hormones are our superpower. They're brilliant. But as we hit perimenopause, obviously the levels of progesterone and estrogen the average levels of them are declining. So they go up and down during our fertile period, during our monthly cycle. But during perimenopause and menopause, they are perimenopause, they're declining, and in menopause, our ovaries are no longer producing these hormones, so we have less of them. So that superpower protection that estrogen and progesterone give us has declined. So what we find is that it's our adrenal glands that take over some of this production of estrogen and progesterone. Just as in the stress response, the adrenal glands release progesterone as well as cortisol in that quick stress response. The adrenal glands are able to produce estrogen and progesterone. But when we are stressed, what they are doing is producing a heck of a lot more adrenaline and cortisol. And so their capacity to replicate some of the estrogen we might need is declined, as is the level of progesterone is not as high as it would be. So we have, and high cortisol means high stress. And with high cortisol and high stress, we actually also get the same symptoms as we get with perimenopause: high blood pressure, reduced insulin sensitivity, digestive tract issues, weight gain, particularly around the middle, frequent viruses, aches and pains, low mood, low energy, poor sleep, lower bone density, increased risk of dementia, memory issues, brain fog, vasomotor symptoms like, for example, night sweats and hot flashes, increased risk of cardiovascular disease, increased heart rate, suppressed reproductive system. Does this sound familiar? These are symptoms that we get in perimenopause, but they're also the impact of chronic high levels of cortisol. So chronic stress becomes a real challenge, and managing our stress is really important, therefore, in order to manage our perimenopause symptoms. So I have a question for you, which is, what are the primary causes of stress for you? Is it continuous, or are they snaps that are there, but they're momentary or short term, and you can see an end to them? Or are they continuous? Is this level of stress high, which would be a 5, or minimal and easy to manage, which would be a 1? So where are your levels of stress? Because that makes a real difference. And how do you feel about those? How do you feel about your capacity to impact those stresses? Can you reduce them? Chronic stress is that continuous level of perceived stress, which leaves those cortisol levels high, as we've said. And it has those significant well-being implications. It exacerbates autoimmune conditions. It decreases our immunity to infection. We're more likely to get type 2 diabetes. We're more likely to suffer with fibromyalgia, ME, and things like that if we have chronic stress. And these things, we're more likely to be susceptible to chronic stress when in perimenopause and postmenopause, because our levels of estrogen and progesterone that were higher and were very protective of us in terms of stress impacting how we feel than we have now. So stress starts to impact us more. But what are the triggers? So there are some interesting things that are triggers that we might not think about. So exercise can be a trigger. If you over-exercise, then you are likely to go into cortisol excess. And you get a level of fatigue where you get no performance improvements at that stage. And in fact, it dips. And that essentially is because your body is in excess cortisol. It is stressed. And it is stressed to a level it can't cope with. So if you exercise to manage other elements of the stress, and you're doing a lot of exercise, it may be that you're over-exercising and adding more stress to your body. And I think there was an element of this for me, because one of the ways I was managing my stress and my well-being, I thought, was a lot of exercise. And I may well have been doing a little bit too much. And I still have to manage that, because sometimes I can do that. Sometimes I can fall into this habit of doing an awful lot of exercise, and noticing that the impact of that is quite important, and maybe pulling it back a bit. What you eat can also add stress. So if you're eating easy ready meals because you don't have time to prepare food and things like that, those sorts of things, and ultra processed foods and high sugar foods. So if you're turning to chocolate to manage your stress, those sorts of things can really impact stress, can cause stress on your body, because they cause spikes in sugar and then spikes in insulin, which cause spikes in cortisol, which lead to high levels of cortisol in your body continuously. Similarly, alcohol can have that kind of effect on the body. Things like recreational drugs and tobacco and smoking, those things can also cause an extra level of stress. And again, we're using them to manage stress, but they're releasing cortisol into our system, which is creating stress. And then there's the things like significant life events, maybe children leaving home, marriage, moving home yourself, changing your job. All of those things can, death of a family member, caring for family members, those things are all significant life events, and they're stressful. Similarly, work can be the source of stress. You may feel like you're overworked and you have no control over that. Or your home life, your relationships, things like that can be a source of stress. So we need to look at where those stress levels are. Divorce, yes, Lawrence, divorce is a big stress challenge, isn't it? It's one of those significant life events that really piles stress onto you. They do say that the three highest levels of stress are moving house, divorce, marriage, and I can't remember what the other one is, but the divorce and marriage are kind of together there. Death in the family, I think, is another one. Anything that leads us to constantly trigger our threat response system, so anything that makes our brain think that we're at risk, will trigger the cortisol release, will trigger the adrenaline release. It'll trigger that fight, flight, freeze response in our body. And that's a good response to have. It's kept us safe for millennia. It's really important that we have it, but it's not designed to be permanently triggered. And that's when we hit these challenges with chronic stress, because we're permanently triggering something which is meant to be short-lived. Deal with this, make sure I still survive, and then I can switch the body back on again. Because what happens when we trigger cortisol and adrenaline, what we're doing is we're switching off blood supply to our digestive system. We're shutting off our reproductive system. We only need the brain to be acting quickly. We don't need it to remember anything. We need the blood flow to our muscles so that we can run away or fight. This is what's happening when we hit that stress. Cortisol and adrenaline cause these things in our body. So when they're going all the time, the body gets confused. It thinks it's constantly fighting. And it can't do that continuously, because there's no normalizing response that's triggered too often. It doesn't come back to normal. It stays high, and that's not good for our bodies. So what can we do about it? Well, one of the things that matters is how we think about things. If we believe that we have the resources within us to manage a situation, and that we can see an end to it, or we can see that we can have some control in it, or we can see something in it that feels positive and possible, we're less likely to feel the effects of chronic stress. We'll still be stressed, but the levels that we have will be more manageable, because we'll be able to return them back to the normal levels, because we can see an end to it. So it's our belief in our capacity, our resources to manage the stress, and the level of optimism we feel about the situation. Is it never ending? Is it never going to stop? Or do we believe it's short-lived? So our optimism about something impacts the level of stress we experience. So the things we could be thinking of, we might think we haven't got time to do stuff. And time is a big one. A lot of us believe we don't have time. And when we really dig down and we really look at that, it's a belief we have, not a reality we have. And that's an interesting one, because we make time for other stuff, and we could make time for the things we might need. So time is one. Control is another. And sometimes we need to think about how we control things for ourselves and little actions rather than looking at the bigger picture and going, well, I can't change that. We can do things for ourselves. We can change how we think about it, and we can take actions that are in line with our values. So we can take action, but control is one of those things that the apparent belief of no control can create incredible stress for us. Money can be a real one, in the sense that, you know, lack of money is a real prospect for so many people. And I know for me, money was this thing. I can't leave this job that I no longer desire and that is making me ill, because we can't afford for me to leave it. But when I actually sat down and I really looked at that, there were options and there were opportunities. And so money can be a real barrier, but it can sometimes not be as big as we perceive it to be. Our mental thoughts around stuff, our mental capacity, do we believe that we have the mental capacity to affect change? Do we believe we have the level of support we need to affect change? Do we have the right relationships around us to support us through the cause of the stress? These psychosocial elements are really important. Without those, we will more likely to experience the chronic stress and the stress of something. With those things around us, with a belief in our capacity and with the support to ensure that capacity can be put in place, we can manage an awful lot more. So when we miss the support, when we miss the relationships, when we miss the belief in ourselves and our own resources, then we experience stress in a far more significant way. And we perhaps don't experience it in an optimistic way, because there is no positive view of where we are in this situation. And so it feels helpless and hopeless, and therefore impacts us hugely. Essentially, though, these are all thoughts. And our thoughts really influence the way we see the world. If you can imagine that your thoughts are creating a pair of binoculars that you're looking through, those binoculars will only see what's in front of them. They won't see the bigger, wide expanse around that. Imagine that I had a TV screen and all you could see was here. You wouldn't know what the expanse of the room was. You wouldn't be able to see that. But equally, you can see the room, but you can't see the rest of the house. So essentially, our eyes are doing that. Our thoughts are doing that. When we look at the world through our thoughts, we restrict it to things that prove the beliefs that we hold. When we recognize the thought and the belief that's tagged with it, and we recognize and can see that those beliefs have not the evidence for them that we think they have, we can make changes and we can expand our horizons, and what we can see is much greater, and what we feel and the power we feel we have is much greater. And this is where coaching comes in. So if this is an area that you're interested in, if this is, if you think that you have no control, that there is nothing you can do about stuff, perhaps a conversation with a coach, with myself or with somebody else, may help. Because noticing the thoughts, realizing what they are, noticing that they're blinkering your vision, and peeling layers of the onion back so that you can access more resources within yourself, more thoughts within, more sides of your being within yourself, will give you greater power, and that stress potentially can be reduced. Its impact on you can be reduced. You may not be able to take away the cause, but the impact can be reduced. So how can you manage your stress yourself? Well, the first is to identify any triggers that there might be. So for me, work was a real trigger. It wasn't the only trigger, but it was a real trigger. And there were elements within work that I felt I had no control over. When I look back at this isn't true. My beliefs about the situation were not true. What I needed was to have a conversation with a coach so that I could unpick my beliefs and see the world differently. And that may have, well, that would have changed things. But I had this view, and this view was very, very clear. But what I wasn't doing was limiting my exposure to those triggers, because I was hitting them head on, day in, day out. And I was blaming those triggers and getting angry with those triggers. In other words, I was exercising contact with those triggers constantly. So limiting exposure to the triggers is really important. For some people, it might be the news. The news is at the moment, well, good news rarely makes the news, does it? Because it doesn't sell in the same way as bad news. And there is a huge amount of bad news out there at the moment. If that's one of your triggers, then limit your exposure to it. Limited exposure, you're managing the stress response, allowing your body to re-normalize itself, get that level playing field and start again. And then there are some simple things that you can do in your day that will reduce stress because they become habits. So create a routine for the day. If you haven't got one, create a routine, build it bit by bit, practice it until it's a habit. Once it's a habit, the stress is reduced. Put into that routine the things that matter to you, things that are really important to you, and things that look after you as well as look after others, because that's a really important thing to put into the routine. If sleep is a problem, look at your sleep. Look at your sleep hygiene. Look at your routines around bedtime. Look at what you're eating close to bedtime. Don't eat close to bedtime if you can avoid it. Don't eat heavy carb-laden foods at, sort of 7 o'clock, maybe 6 o'clock onwards in the evening. Look carefully at those if sleep is a problem. Cortisol can keep us awake. It will wake you. So if your cortisol levels are high, then this can be an issue. If you're eating carb-laden foods, chocolate, again in the evenings, for example, high sugar and high carb foods in the evenings, then you'll have an insulin spike, which will cause a cortisol spike. And that cortisol spike may well wake you up somewhere between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning, and you won't know why. And it's probably that. And you'll be wide awake. Why the heck am I wide awake? Probably a cortisol spike. So manage what you're eating as well. Eat a Mediterranean style diet. Not all the time, obviously, just be mindful of what you're eating. That plate that's a quarter protein, a quarter carbs, half colourful vegetables. That sort of food will help. Connect with others. It's really important to have those social relationships, because often when we're feeling really stressed, we can withdraw. Make the steps to step out of that. Start, if you can't step out and be in that contact with others, then start by practicing gratitude, because that will start that process. And then perhaps think about one person to connect to and build those social connections. And exercise regularly. Now remember, I said too much exercise is bad for you, but with all of these things, too much of anything is too much. It's the phrase too much. So be mindful about your exercise, but exercise regularly, around 150 minutes of exercise a week. 150 minutes of walking a week would do the trick. And if you can get outside in nature with that exercise, I suggest for managed stress that maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes in your garden or outside every day in the morning and in the evening, and just sitting and listening to the birds, the noise of the wind in the trees, whatever it is, but noticing and being present and grounding yourself and really just being there in the moment in nature will be really beneficial for you. But this is where that really important bit that I forgot comes in. There are 4 states that our body and mind can be in. Calm body, busy mind, calm body, busy mind, busy body, and calm mind, calm body. So my ways that I thought that I was looking after my well-being, I was aware of the times when my mind and my body were hectically busy. So I then had, the times when my mind was calm, swimming, exercising. My mind is calm, my body's busy, but my mind is really present and in the moment and in the now. It's not anywhere else. And I had those calm body, but my mind was busy. I couldn't switch off. I might be flicking through emails, playing games on my phone, but I was never calm mind. I was calm body, but not calm mind. The bit I missed was those times every single day of calm body, calm mind. So our bodies are rested and our brain is in the present. It's not, if thoughts are there, we notice them, we label them. I notice there's a thought around that piece of work I've got to do for work and that I haven't done yet. I notice there's a thought about how am I going to afford the kids' clothes, this new shoes, their feet are growing. Notice the thoughts, label them, but don't attend to them. Just notice them and be present and come back to the here and now. Think of your breathing, center on your breathing, what your shoulders doing. For me, this was doorstep mindfulness. This is what I did, and it was very simple. I used the doorstep, the door threshold going between rooms as a kind of trigger to center myself. And it literally is stop, relax your shoulders, go back, relax your shoulders, relax your neck, put your arms down, notice where your hands are, notice where your feet are touching the ground, notice your breathing, calm the whole thing down, bring yourself into the present, and then move through the door. That meant that when I moved from one room to another, so for example out of my office into the school, I was present and available for everybody. And when I went the other way around, I was releasing what it was I'd been dealing with within the school, and bringing myself back into the space where I was going to address some of the things I needed to do in my office. These sorts of things don't need to be big. That maybe 1 minute at the most, but done regularly has an effect of calming the mind and lowering the stress hormones. So you don't need to find lots of time, you just need to build a routine around calm mind, calm body, twice at least a day. If you can find 10 minutes twice a day, maybe in bursts, whatever, that's really important. Find that time. And when you do this, you notice your surroundings with your whole senses, each one of them, all 5. Smells, sounds, tastes, touch, sight. Really notice and connect with those. Connect with the feelings in your body and really come back to today. Come back to the moment now, but where you're present in the moment. And take control. Think about your values. When we're stressed, we tend to move away from our values and we display behaviours that aren't things that we would necessarily agree with or want to agree with. So move towards your values. Be purposeful in your actions. Move towards your values. Take small, measurable steps towards the values that you desire. You can't control anybody else, but you can control your own response to things. So be kind to yourself, be compassionate to yourself. Notice and forgive. If you're berating yourself, notice and forgive. Show compassion. You don't need to challenge it. You don't need to accept it. You don't need to engage it. Notice and forgive. And journal and practice gratitude. Small actions that can make a difference. So, having listened to that, I want you to think about one small action that you can take that you are not doing now towards improving your stress response, towards managing the impact stress is having on you and on your perimenopause symptoms and in general on your health and your well-being. Because it's modern day life can create this idea that we have to be in constant hustle. But we are not designed to be in constant hustle. Constant hustle means we are triggering fight, flight, freeze constantly. We don't need to hustle to move forwards. We need to build in time to be now, in the present. So what is the small step that you can take? And just as a side, really, this is a key element in my menopause mindset program, Managing Stress. Thanks, Lawrence. If this is an area you focus on for you, if stress is a key thing for you, then perhaps the menopause mindset program is for you. Even if it's just for some of the resources that are on there around stress, but also for the 3 coaching sessions that you get. Because the coaching sessions can be such a powerful way to highlight, challenge, and change the belief system you have and create a world of infinite possibilities so that you can create the world you want. So have a think about that and let me know if that's something that interests you. Thank you for listening.